In April 1981, the mountain town of Keddie, California was quiet. A forgotten railroad resort tucked deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains, surrounded by thick forest and high cliffs. It wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. It was the kind of place people went to disappear from the noise of the world. A few dozen cabins, a dirt road, a single payphone, and a population small enough to fit in a diner booth. But on one cold morning, everything changed. And that silence, the peace that once defined Keddie, was shattered forever. Sunday, April 12, 1981. 14-year-old Sheila Sharp was walking home from a sleepover. Just after 7 a.m. The sky was grey, the air cool, the mountain mist still clinging to the trees. She turned onto the dirt road that led to Cabin 28, where she lived with her mother and 4 siblings. The cabin was quiet, the front door was slightly open. She stepped inside and froze. On the living room floor, 3 bodies lay tangled together: her mother Sue Sharp, her 15-year-old brother John, and his 17-year-old friend Dana Wingate. They had been bound, beaten, and stabbed to death. The room was soaked in blood. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, even the furniture. Everywhere she looked, red. Sheila ran screaming from the cabin and into the neighbor's yard. Within minutes, the small community was awake, and word of the horror spread like wildfire. But as sheriff's deputies arrived, they made a discovery that made the scene even stranger. 3 boys, 12-year-old Rick, 10-year-old Greg, and their friend Justin Smart, were found asleep and unharmed in the bedroom just down the hall. They hadn't heard a thing. And 12-year-old Tina, Sheila's younger sister, was missing. The crime scene was chaos, a picture of brutality and confusion. Sue had been tied up with electrical cords, gagged with a bandana and medical tape, and beaten repeatedly with a hammer. Her throat had been slit. John had been bludgeoned and stabbed. Dana, his friend who'd come to spend the night, had been strangled and hit so hard in the head that his skull fractured. Blood patterns showed that the killers moved freely through the cabin, methodical and unhurried. The phone had been taken off the hook, the cord cut. A window had been left open. And in the middle of the floor were the murder weapons: a hammer, a steak knife, and another kitchen knife bent almost at a right angle from the force of the blows. Nothing was stolen. This wasn't a robbery. It was something personal. The Sharp family had moved to Keddie less than a year earlier. Glenna Sue Sharp, 36 years old, was a single mother raising 5 kids after leaving an abusive marriage in Connecticut. She packed everything she owned into a car and driven across the country, landing in Keddie because rent was cheap, and she wanted a quieter life for her children. Cabin 28 was old but comfortable, a place where she hoped to start over. She was known to neighbors as polite but private, a woman who worked part-time, studied business, and devoted her life to her kids. By all accounts, the Sharps were just another small-town family trying to get by. So why would someone want them dead? Investigators immediately began looking at people close to the family. One name came up again and again: Martin Smart, a neighbor who lived in Cabin 26, just 2 doors away. Marty was a U.S. Air Force veteran with a violent temper and a history of abuse. He was married to Marilyn Smart, who happened to be a friend of Sue's. Marilyn's son, Justin, had been one of the boys sleeping in the cabin that night, the one who somehow survived. Living with Marty at the time was a man named John Bo Baubed, a drifter and ex-con with alleged ties to organized crime in Chicago. The 2 men were close, too close, some neighbors said. They were often seen drinking together, talking in low voices, or hanging around the local bar. And both men were acting strangely after the murders. When questioned, Marty told police that he and Bo had spent the night drinking at the Keddie bar until around midnight, then gone home. He claimed he'd been asleep when the murders occurred. But investigators weren't so sure. During interviews, Marty's stepson Justin described having what he called a dream about the killings. He said he saw 2 men in the living room, one with long hair, the other wearing glasses. In his dream, there was an argument. Then the men began attacking Sue and John. He said he saw Tina being taken out the back door by one of them. Police began to suspect it wasn't a dream at all. Detectives questioned Marty again. This time he offered strange, rambling answers and seemed to enjoy talking about the murders. He admitted he owned a hammer, similar to one found at the scene, but said it had gone missing before the killings. A few weeks later, he left Keddie and moved to Nevada. Before leaving, he wrote a letter to his ex-wife. "I've paid the price for your love," it said. "And now that I've killed 4 people, what else do you want?" Marilyn turned the letter over to the police. And somehow, it was never processed as evidence. Even stranger, around the same time, an anonymous call came into the sheriff's office. The man on the line said he knew where to find Tina Sharp's remains. The call was recorded, but nobody followed up. A year later, on April 22, 1984, a human skull was found 90 miles away in the woods near Feather Falls, California. Forensic analysis confirmed it was Tina. Her cause of death was never determined. Her clothing and bones were scattered across the dirt. And when investigators checked their records, they realized the earlier call, predicting the exact location, had been real. The tape of that call later disappeared. By then, the case was already falling apart. Evidence had been misplaced, leads went cold. And the surviving Sharp children, haunted by trauma, moved away, trying to rebuild their lives. The murders became something locals whispered about. The cabin sat abandoned, its windows shattered, its walls still stained with dried blood. People said it was cursed. In 2004, Cabin 28 was demolished, but the story never died. In 2013, more than 30 years later, the case was reopened. New Sheriff Greg Hagwood grew up in the area and had known the Sharp family personally. He vowed to find answers. Detectives uncovered new physical evidence, including a rusty hammer found in a nearby pond that matched one Marty Smart claimed he'd lost. DNA testing also revealed a blood sample from the cabin that didn't match any of the victims, pointing toward a still unidentified suspect. And digital analysis of old case files revealed what many long suspected: that key evidence and records from 1981 had been mishandled or deliberately buried. The sheriff publicly stated, "This was personal, Sue and her family were targeted." And the main suspects were Marty Smart and Bo Baubed. Both men were dead by then, Marty in 2000, Bo a year later. But even in death, their names lingered over the case like ghosts. As more files were reviewed, a picture began to form, one of jealousy, rage, and betrayal. Marty's marriage was falling apart. His wife Marilyn had grown close to Sue Sharp, who'd been helping her plan a separation. Marty resented Sue for it. He told friends she was meddling in his marriage. In the weeks before the murders, he'd started sleeping with a hammer under his pillow. One of the bar patrons from that night recalled him saying, "I've got to teach someone a lesson." And the next morning, Cabin 28 was a bloodbath. Despite the circumstantial evidence, no charges were ever filed. Decades later, investigators found an old police note describing a call from the Department of Justice in 1981, stating that Bo Baubed was an informant for federal authorities. That note was quietly filed away and never pursued. The implication was chilling. If Bo was protected, that protection may have extended to his friend. The case still haunts everyone connected to it. Former detectives have admitted publicly that it's solvable, that the truth is buried somewhere in those missing files, or in DNA that's never been tested. And some locals insist they know who did it, that justice was blocked by corruption or incompetence. But official silence remains. Today, the site of Cabin 28 is empty, just a patch of grass where the foundation used to be, surrounded by pine and wind. Visitors leave flowers, crosses, and hand-painted signs that read "Justice for the Sharps." If you walk through Keddie at dusk, the forest feels almost alive, the sound of branches swaying, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the faint whisper of mountain air through the trees. It's easy to imagine how quiet it must have been that night. The killers moving in the dark. The children asleep down the hall. The silence after the screams faded. A silence that has lasted for more than 40 years. The Keddie murders remain one of California's most gruesome unsolved cases, a tangle of lost evidence, corruption, and tragedy. A family slaughtered without mercy, a missing child found in the woods, and a small town that has never truly recovered.